get back to Mother Earth here. The real mother. Well, this is, you know, the world, the Earth. We had freezing temperatures last night. It snowed up north already. Monday there was a harvest moon. It was beautiful. It was huge. It lit up the whole backyard is what it did. And then, of course, you might know that every farmer's used to plant their crops or put in their winter wheat during the harvest moon. And our temperature got into, let's say, it got down to 31. What day was that, Bob?
Yesterday morning here it was 31. Well, up north it was much colder.
Yeah, here it was 31 up north. It was much colder. But it's supposed to warm up during the next few days, so I guess we better enjoy it because, you know, cold winds are coming. Cold weather's coming. I want to talk a little bit about our oceans and our sea. I originally got interested in the oceans and the seas in 6th grade. My mother had a boyfriend who was a circuit court judge, and he always brought me neat books. So one time he had brought me Rachel Carson's And the Sea Around Us. And I loved it so much that I actually did a book report in 6th grade on it. And of course, my family vacationed down in Florida every year and on Fort Myers Beach. And so I really grew to love the oceans, and they're finding so much trash in the oceans now. People who go out boating, and I've seen them do it. Guys will drink their beer and they throw the can overboard. People at the beach a lot of times let the stuff blow away. If they have potato chip bags or whatever, they just leave it go, and of course it ends up in the ocean. And then of course some poor unsuspecting fish will get a piece of something, a plastic bottle or whatever, and it kills them. But the oceans are very important to us. And of course we all remember that on Friday they had an earthquake in Indonesia with 7.6. Tsunamis got to 20 feet high, wiped out a lot of people so far.
800 people.
Yeah, well, 850 was the last count, but they're still discovering bodies, and that count is expected to go up. And they can be devastating, that's for sure. One of the things when I was living in Hawaii that I used to scratch my head about was they have tsunami warnings there, a loud blaring tone, intermittent blaring tone. And when I was at work, a lot of the people would leave work and go down to the beach to watch the tsunami come in. It's like, where are you going to go if it hits, you know? So I never quite understood why they ran, you know, towards the water rather than the land. But, you know, that was their decision, their little adventure they may have gone on. But we have a lake up here called Lake Dubay. And it's a pretty lake. How big do you think that really is, Bob? How many?
Mile across.
Mile across, maybe. There's a lot of nice fancy homes around it. But if you go fishing on that lake, you are only allowed to eat 2 fish a year because of the mercury levels in it. Bob, do you want to talk a little more about that?
It's well, it's a lot of the pollution, mercury, and there's other toxins, toxic chemicals in the water. Lake Dubay is it's a dammed up area of the Wisconsin River, and the Wisconsin River has a lot of wood manufacturing plants where they do wood processing and other things, and there's a few companies that do manufacturing. They dump all the wastewater right into the Wisconsin River, and that's one of the reasons it's so toxic. Some of it, the toxins come from manufacturing over in Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and as the toxins go up the chimney and wind up in the clouds, and then the clouds come over here and rain, and once again the toxic chemicals, fall out of the rain into the rivers and streams, and yeah, it's so toxic along the Wisconsin River. For one thing, there's only a few places along the entire length of the Wisconsin River where they allow swimming because the water is so toxic. And then the fish, any waters connected to the Wisconsin River, they recommend that you don't eat more than 2 fish a year. That's because you'll exceed the toxicity limit of the toxic chemicals in the water.
And of course, if you're pregnant or if you're very old or if you're very young, you don't eat any. It's that toxic here. We actually have a paper factory in our town of Mosinee, and the old joke is you smell Mosinee long before you actually get to the city because it puts out so many pollutants into the air. It smells like, it's worse than rotten eggs, let's put it that way. And it just, if the wind is blowing a certain way, it just is oppressive to breathe, let alone the chemtrails above that we see all the time, tons of chemtrails. The oceans around Mexico are very pretty. I think Jacques Cousteau, if I remember right, said that where the inlet is, the Sea of Cortez and the Caribbean meet there, he called it the world's natural aquarium. I just remember that from years ago because I used to watch him a lot. And so hopefully that place will remain a little pristine or nice where all the beautiful fish are. I know I used to, in Hawaii, excuse me, I used to enjoy taking walks along the volcanic paths by the ocean, and they had where the little dips in the volcanic rock were pools of water, and they would, it's actually fresh water because it rained in those pools. It wasn't from the ocean. They had pools of mollies, which is a tropical fish. I used to raise tropical fish, and I used to get the mollies, the wild mollies, from these little pools and take them home and put them in my aquarium. They were quite different than the ones you get in the pet store that are actually, I would consider them rather tame compared to what they had in the little pools. And there were other tropical fish there too. I don't recall what they were, but they had other ones that people would gather up and take home. So it was really a neat little venture tour going there along that path. I used to take my kids. It was nice. Yeah.
Well, everybody knows how polluted the oceans are. About, I'm going to guess maybe 10 years ago, I had a dream, or maybe it wasn't even a dream, it might have been a real experience, where I met this lady who was from another planet, and she was on the seafloor with a group of scientists from another planet, and they were here to Earth on a cleanup mission, and they were working on the bottom of the ocean, and they were out doing their thing in the water, and they invited me to come along, and I was right in the water swimming with them, and I was wondering how I was able to breathe in the ocean water, and they said that they aerated the water so that any human could breathe in it. And I thought that was kind of an interesting experience. And as I talked to this lady scientist, she also had her son with her. She had like a 10 or 12-year-old son that accompanied her. She was a single mother from this other planet, and she decided to come here on the mission, to help us out here. And I just thought that was an interesting experience I had.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, we're going to switch subjects here again, and we're going to go into some dreams that we've had and some experiences. I can start out. One of the dreams I had was, this is going to be a series of 3 things with Paul Twitchel. And in one of the dreams, he was painting my house. That looked rather old. And he was painting it all a light blue. He had a big paintbrush in his hand and was doing that for me, which is kind of nice. And then in the second night, I had a dream with him where he had my head over a sink and he was washing my hair. And not only did he wash it once, he washed it twice. And then another time I was, this is actually what happened as I was singing New You around the house. I was playing Andre Rieu's, he's that violinist from Germany, and he's very famous and beautiful violin. I love his music. And he was playing Italian music. And all of a sudden the scene opens and I am in a theater type setting, and there is a wooden floor and there is a big baby grand piano, and Paul Twitchel comes on stage and he has on his black tails and his white starched shirt with a white starched collar and a black bow tie and black shiny shoes. And he looked like a conductor. And Andre Rieu was playing, at the time this occurred, he was playing O Solo Mio. And I immediately got a picture of a beautiful Italian city. And then Luciano Pavarotti comes riding in on a wave of light. And he started singing O Solo Mio. And I have had like 3 dreams with, this was not a dream, but I've had 3 other dreams with him. And the first one I had was I could hear him singing, but he was behind a closed door, so I couldn't see him. The next dream I had, he came out on stage and he sang to me. And then the next dream I had, he did it again. Of course, he was one of my favorite tenors.
Pavarotti, right?
Pavarotti.
You're talking about Pavarotti.
Yeah, Luciano Pavarotti, sorry. And so this was a really nice thing that I had. I sing New You around the house a lot, and if there happens to be music playing, I sing New You to it if it fits. And so that was the 3 things with Paul Twitchel that I had. And I'm going to tell about, every now and then I get the reptilians. This is a couple of things I've had happen this last week. And I was singing New You during a New You session, and I find myself walking down a hall. Now the hall is painted gray, and I walk and I see this rust-colored lizard man, and he looked very, very dejected. He was just sitting there. I could just feel his pain or whatever he was going through. And I said to him, now, first of all, let me do a little description here. He was sitting on a oak bench, what I assume to be similar to an oak bench. It had the slats in it. It did not have a back, and it was butted up against a gray wall. And the gray wall, actually, where the bench ended, turned a rounded corner. The roundness went way up to, I couldn't see the ceiling, but I imagine it went up to that. And he was sitting there with his hands clasped. He had on a pair of gray, kind of rumpled pants, kind of wrinkled. And he had on what would be maybe a light, the closest to the material would be a white, light linen type shirt without a collar. It had one big button down because it didn't really make a V, but it came together. And I had asked him telepathically, what's wrong? And he just looked at me. And when he looked at me, he had these kind of amber gold eyes, and he had what is the dog that has those long eye? Basset hound. He looked at me with the wrinkles like of a basset hound. And he said, it's a long story. And of course, this was telepathically too. But he looked similar to maybe a collared lizard without the collar, or a bearded dragon, or without, what they call the beard around the neck. But that was one experience I had. And then another one happened last night where Bob was listening to the scores of a baseball game, and all of a sudden I am looking at this scene where there was a group of these reptilians, and they were humongous. I mean, humongous. That's all I can say about them. And they were looking down this, what almost looked like a volcanic opening, but it was much, much bigger than that. And the reason I guess I thought it looked like volcano was because it had an orangish, reddish glow about it. And as they were looking down in there, one of them turned to look at me. And when he turned, his head looked, well, as a gator turns to look at you and open their mouth, that's basically what he did. His eyes were pretty horrible. And so he must have felt I was there. And of course, the other ones didn't pay any attention to me. They were looking down at whatever was going on. I wanted to get close enough to look at what was going on. But when he turned around and did that to me, I scrammed, I guess. Came back. So anyway, that's kind of what's been happening for me on the dream scene. I had yesterday I had two women come and ding dong, ring the doorbell. And of course, and who's that? And they're standing there with their Bibles, and I thought, oh boy, here we go. It wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. It could have been Mormon or something, because I kind of looked beyond them outside, and down around the cul-de-sac there were many people. Some had long skirts on, whatnot. But she chose to ring my bell, and of course they were friendly, but I told them about the new UU. And actually, I think I did a lot of the talking. And then one of the ladies happened to say, well, I see we're not on the same page. And as she was leaving, she turned around to me and she said, I have to study something thoroughly before I move on. And then I said, fine, have a nice adventure, or have a fun adventure. And they left, so that was kind of interesting.